The Convo by Design Icon Registry inductees this month are Jordon Slocum and Barry Bordelon, aka the Brownstone Boys. They appeared on the show around 2020. I feel strongly about historical preservation, and I cannot think of anyone off the top of my head who does this as authentically as Jordon and Barry. So neither were born in Brooklyn, but they found themselves there with a passion for design and a love of brownstones. Their authenticity with regard to the work, it's inescapable. And their sole focus on the mission of restoring old brownstones is what I think makes them so unique. This is not a flavor of the month activity to become socially relevant. They started their passion project first, turned it into a business, and the fame followed, as did more projects, book deals, and all the other fun stuff designers want as part of their professional portfolio. The other aspect to their work that I find so wonderful, it's their approach to each project, not recreating it in a vacuum, in the original form of the architect, but reimagining it and keeping with the essence and the purpose of the work. Historical reference, but also reimagining it to seamlessly fit into the neighborhood with all the modern amenities one could hope for without shoehorning it in, if that makes sense. It flows effortlessly into each completed project, allowing those who love brownstones to enjoy this, as well as allowing the architectural purist to appreciate the workmanship and creative approach to a revitalized building. Please enjoy an encore airing of that first conversation with Barry and Jordon, our December 2024 inductees to the Convo by Design Icon Registry, the Brownstone Boys. Brownstone Boys, welcome. And welcome to all of you. Again, my name is Josh Cooperman. I'm the host and publisher of Convo by Design, a podcast for the design and architecture industry. First of all, as Erica said, please make sure that your lines are muted. Thank you. And if you do have any questions, we'll be going back to them periodically as applicable to the conversation. So as you see the chat feature, just sort of type your questions in. Erica will jump in with those questions as they come up. And if you like the conversation, and we hope that you do, you will be able to download it and subscribe and listen again. You can listen as many times as you want after this. Find Convo by Design and subscribe. You'll get it automatically. With that, Brownstone Boys, welcome. Jordon and Barry, how are we doing today?
Doing great.
We're doing great. Thank you.
Good. It's so great to see you. I love that last week we had a chance to meet and talk. And I shared with you that being a native Angelino, I have absolutely no knowledge or reference of the whole brownstone idea, concept, architecture, sort of this culture that exists within the architect. And I love that. And so I thought, it would be a good place to start. Tell me about brownstones. Tell me about the culture behind it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the only thing that I would say is that if you've ever seen Sex and the City or Sesame Street or a lot of those really iconic shows that are shot in New York, then you've seen Brownstone, Brooklyn, because the stoop in the front and the tree-lined streets and the architecture and the history, that really kind of encompasses a lot of a brownstone neighborhood in Brooklyn. And technically what a brownstone is it's a row house, which you may be familiar with. It's just a row of houses that all touch one another. And they're usually a masonry building, but the actual facade of them is covered traditionally in something called brownstone. It's something that was mined just outside of New York, kind of in the Northeast. And now it's sort of has changed a little bit and actually encompasses more than just a home that's covered in that facade called brownstone. Sometimes it's just a brick building. Sometimes it's stucco now, more modern technology, more modern building materials. But the idea of a brownstone is still kind of the same. That tree-lined street with the stoop, the row house. And I think the thing that kind of ties it all together is the community, because everyone hangs out on their stoop. Everyone, sits and, has a drink, has a glass of wine, eats dinner. Our neighborhood does something called the Stoop Social, where everyone just kind of, and it's been great during COVID as well, because you're sort of naturally social distance because everyone's kind of on their stoop and you can walk around and talk to your neighbors still. And so really the community around it and the way it sort of brings people out to the front of their house and meeting one another is really the thing that ties it all together.
And we live in an area called Bed-Stuy, and it's in Brooklyn, but it is primarily Brownstone, Brooklyn, within Bed-Stuy. But there are other areas in Manhattan and Harlem. There is a really well-known Brownstone district. Washington, D.C., there's also a Brownstone community. And I believe in Philadelphia as well, too, there's a Brownstone. So this community, this Brownstone culture, is still in America. And it's just
East Coast based.
East Coast. But as an early age, I grew up out west as well too, and it's just that background on the TV of watching Sesame Street and just that culture. It's like I want to be part of that. So that began the obsession for me at a very early age.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny too, because I also feel like for you two in particular, I mean, let's be honest, you're from Las Vegas and New Orleans respectively, which means you're used to this tight-knit social community where you can walk around with a drink.
Yeah. It is funny. We're pretty much the only two large cities in the U.S. where you can do that, which is kind of interesting that we found one another in New York where you can't.
No, it's funny, but I think what's really interesting too. So, prior to the Brownstone, you had in these areas, you had Greek Revival, you had Federalist architecture, primarily brick, and then now here's an indigenous material in the actual Brownstone that sort of turned into this subculture. And I want to just back up 1 second. I think the whole idea of the stoop is really interesting. The stoop, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it feels like the stoop itself, it has a life of its own, right?
Definitely.
It really does. I mean, it does. It's something like, I think what attracts people to these buildings in a big way is the actual stoop.
Yes.
You're excited about sitting on it and having a drink on it and meeting your neighbors. And
it's also a grand entrance. So you're walking up sometimes very ornate staircase to get to the front door. And it's just that feeling of walking up to this building that I haven't witnessed anywhere else. So it's really special. And it is definitely a thing that attracted us to want to buy one. Was the stoop, because that's the first thing you kind of see in front of the Brownstone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and again, I think what's really important about this, and the reason why it's so special, or one of the reasons why it's so special, is because it is a social center, because of how the architecture is. You've got shared walls, but people aren't really coming in. The stoop represents that social engagement. And what's fun too is when you see movies, TV, any sort of representation of the West Coast, you see beaches, you see the Hollywood sign, whenever you see something New York related, be it Woody Allen, Spike Lee, Sex and the City, the stoop is always represented in some way, shape, or form. It's always there.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes it so special, and that's what makes it so New York. Things I miss about California just from being out west are the beaches. And when I see that in a TV or a movie, it's like, I have to plan a trip out to California now. I really need to get out there. But for me, it was always just that feeling of like, I need to move to New York because of that brownstone, because of that stoop and that culture and what that entails.
Yeah.
So go ahead, please.
I was going to say that it's also, the walkable streets, and usually when we're talking about our street, and it's Brownstone Street that has a lot of stoops and it's a nice environment, but if you walk in either direction, there's always cafes and bars and things that you can walk to. So even when you leave your house and you walk down the street and you walk by everyone else's stoop while you're on the way to dinner, and saying how your neighbors are sitting out front. So it really creates a really just nice environment. It's a really pleasant environment. And it's just something that I think attracts a lot of people, which is why we were attracted to it, and why now a lot of our clients, because every client that we work with is someone who wants to renovate one of these old buildings as well, and it's why they were attracted to it too. So it's something that a lot of people are interested in as well. And even though obviously COVID is a difficult situation in a lot of ways, we haven't really seen the desirability of buying a brownstone and renovating it decrease at all. It's still something that's really popular, and it held its own in the real estate market.
So when you turning to design now, right? When you look at a new project, do you start with the stoop or do you start with the interior? Is that because I kind of envision it like that's the front yard, right? That's sort of the landscape, if you will, of the brownstone. Is that where you start, or do you start with the inside and then make the outside to match?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was going to say that I feel like we more often start with the inside, even though the outside is really important. The inside is where most of the work has to happen. Like a lot of times, the facade on the building is in good shape, and it's still original. Not many people are coming in and changing the original facade of the building, so it still has that look and feel, and it looks great. The inside needs a ton of work. The inside, just everything a lot of times has to go. A lot of it, most of these places have been through a lot of renovations over their 150-year, 130-year lives. So there's just a ton of stuff to do on the inside. And so we try to get to work on that. Renovations are long just because there's a lot of stuff to restore. There's a lot of intricacy with the structural part of it. Just renovating in New York City is difficult. It takes longer to do. So we're trying to get a lot of that stuff going so we can get someone into their home. And the facade is always something that it
comes up like midway through the renovation. I mean, there's always conversation about the exterior, about the stoop. But we really work out all those specific details like halfway through the renovation. I want to say when we start in the framing phase, then we're like, okay, what are we going to do about that front door? And what are we going to do a bit about that brownstone that's actually, missing some, needs some repointing. So it's usually about halfway through the renovation that we'll start figuring out the exterior work that needs to be done.
So let's talk about you for a second. Let's talk about yours for a second. Let's talk about your project. Who kind of took the lead on the design?
I think we sort of did it together. Like we really, I would say certain aspects of it, we would, one of us would find and it's like an inspiration picture that we loved, and we would send it to the other person, and we were usually on the same page. But I would say that we both equally kind of designed different aspects of it.
There were things that both of us had. I knew that Barry was very passionate about the kitchen. And while the kitchen for me was important, I also knew that I trusted him. And at the same time, I was like, I want to see what direction he's going to bring this kitchen to. So he took the lead on that. Why I was very passionate about our guest bathroom. And I had this very, very specific vision that I have planned out for years and years. And I knew I was going to get that bathroom. So I had to do some convincing on Barry's end to make it work. But I think it came out all right.
Yeah. The only thing that we sort of disagree on, I think, is color. Yes. I am like white and gray and different shades of gray are what I'm usually will tend to go toward. And Jordon loves colorful things. So I have to, it takes me a while to get there on a lot of the really colorful stuff, for at least for our stuff. I love when clients do it. It's great. It's fun. I mean, it's their house. But for me, I'm all about the shades of gray.
I love this too, because Barry Jordon is just kind of like, you're looking for that approval, and he's just like, yeah, you were really difficult to deal with. But it's funny because we see that all the time, right? So you have this, I love having this conversation with you in particular, because as designers, you know that the first big battle you have to fight is figuring out what the true desire is versus what they're telling you. right? And then you have to figure out what kind of client are they? Are they going to be super difficult? Are they going to pretend like they're easygoing? And then at the moment and then you get the trap, right? Then the moment there's something, it's like, oh, I didn't know they were like that. So I'm curious, what kind of clients are you? And how did you get, knowing that you're both so very, very different, how did you get to what you wanted in your own space? And then I want to start talking about the design in particular.
That's a really good question, Josh. What would you say about how we are as clients?
I think that we compromised a lot. I think we found, I don't remember there being one thing that we had like a huge disagreement over and we just could not come to an agreement. You know, I think it was, we're on the same page with almost everything, and any place that we could. Probably was related to color, and like I wanted, white and you wanted something crazy.
A lot of our arguments, or not arguments, but our conversation was about budget. Yeah. And we both have very expensive taste, and we like very nice things. And then we kind of weren't factoring that into the original design. We had all the items picked out, and then we start putting the numbers together, and we're like, oh, how are we going to make this work? Get rid of this, get rid of that. So we actually turned on our creative switches, and we got really creative of how to kind of replicate our, everything that we had saved or pinned, and do that in a budget conscious way. So I think we kind of learned even more a bit about each other through a renovation, which if you had asked me before we renovated, I would have had the complete opposite answer. But I think it even brought us closer together as a couple.
Yeah. And I think we also pulled each other out of our comfort zone a little bit. Yeah. So, there's definitely some features in our house that I would never have selected myself, but I absolutely love them. We have a friend of ours painted this very huge and bright and loud mural in our guest bedroom that is absolutely beautiful, and I can't imagine the room without it. But it's just a very bright and loud thing that I would not have personally chosen without Jordon pulling me in that direction. And then I think some of like the layout stuff and like the nuts and bolts of the place and putting it all together, I pulled Jordon, out of his comfort zone with. And probably even just buying a place and renovating it in general, I probably pulled Jordon out of his comfort zone because I'd been through it a few times and I've done renovations, and it was Jordon's first.
Yeah, this was my first home. I have been collecting images over the years. It's always been a passion. And for me, this was something so large, and Barry literally held my hand throughout the whole entire process and just, confided to me that we're going to get through this. It's going to be okay. There's going to be challenges. So I already had those expectations, and it was something, I'm so thankful for.
So let's talk about the challenges for a second, because you brought up the age of these homes, and let's just be honest here. Anytime there's a renovation, the moment you open the walls, you're going to start finding things, right? And generally the older the home, unless it was made in the 70s. You take the 70s out, but at the older the home, you're going to start finding issues, right? But you're also talking about a home that, unless you're on one cap or the other, you're sharing both walls, which means you have shared issues, you have shared problems, you have really old pipes, you've got, the infrastructure, you don't know what you're getting to. I'm curious, what were some of your bigger challenges that you discovered once you started prying things open?
You know what's kind of crazy is a lot of what we find that is the biggest problems once you like open up floors and walls don't have as much to do with the age of the home, but to what has been done to it over 130 years. So, a lot of times in every single renovation that we do, there's always joists that have been cut through by renovations over the years, where they just cut right through it, decided, we don't need this joist here, run a pipe straight through it. And so we have to go in and fix that stuff. And that's honestly, I would say, we know we're going to find that in every single renovation. We can build in budget because we know we're going to have to go in and fix things that people messed up over the years. Most of them need full electrical and plumbing. So we know we're coming in to do that because, again, they probably have done some work over the years. There's probably a patchwork of stuff. So our projects are usually full gut renovations, obviously, in restorations or restoring what we can, but modernizing everything and ripping all the plumbing and the electrical out and completely replacing it.
Yeah.
So,
and there's also something with the historic homes, Brownstone being included in that, is the original details, the original plaster work that you have to take in consideration, that there's plaster specialists that are the only ones that will do the skilled work.
There's not many of them.
There's not that many of them. Stained glass, and if you want your beautiful transom windows replaced, you're looking at a specialist, and that's just going to require more budget. A very big common problem here in Brooklyn in the older homes is stripping the paint off the woodwork. There's usually layers upon layers upon layers of paint covering really beautiful woodwork. And, we did it to our place, and other clients that see it, and just from their inspiration, they want that original woodwork back in their home. So we look into painting specialists that can go ahead and remove the paint.
We actually, in our place, we decided we wanted to strip the paint off of the woodwork, which you could see under the 50 layers of paint. It was beautiful. And we thought we would strip it off and just get it to a point where we could repaint it, so that it didn't have the multiple layers and globs and drips and everything that happened over the years. And it ended up being so beautiful after the paint was stripped off it that we decided to leave it natural and not put something back on top of it. And I guess in one way, the many layers of paint kind of preserve what's under it. It preserves the woodwork. And so when you do take the paint off, it's just gorgeous. And so that's a big thing that we do in most of our projects, is restore the woodwork. It's a lot of work. It is a really nasty job. It is not, it's not fun. There's not a lot of people who even want to do that type of work. So it is tough to find someone. And that's what we've put together, this really great network of specialists that do all this sort of things, that we know they do great work, and they do it affordably and, and timely. And that's really helped us sort of take what we've learned in our renovation, because we were kind of our own guinea pigs in our renovation, where we met a lot of the specialists we work with and learned a lot of what we've taken to the other projects that we manage.
So, and we don't have any today. We don't have any pictures of your current project, but I would like to encourage everyone to go to your website. It's thebrownstoneBoys.com, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, there's lots of pictures of our place on our website and our Instagram. It's just Brownstone Boys.
Perfect. So let's switch gears to the Simply Sin reno.
Yes.
Tell me about this project.
Yes. So Cynthia and Les reached out to us right in the middle of our own renovation. We had blogged a bit about our entire experience. And one night we were on Instagram, and I noticed that we got a little message that with a little blue check mark. And I was like, Barry, I think something verified just reached out to us. And we read the message, and they were like, we love your content. We love your story. We love your renovation. We're learning so much. We just bought a home, and we would love to meet with you guys for coffee. So we met with Cynthia and her husband, and we just immediately fell in love with them. We learned that she is a social media influencer, also was a lawyer, and they just bought a home also in Brooklyn, and they were going through a major renovation, and they needed some guidance throughout their entire renovation. So Barry and I talked to them, and we decided that we were going to take on the role of project managers for their renovation.
So it's interesting though, because they were our first client, and a lot of people, we've heard from a lot of people over the year-long process of our renovation. We were blogging about it. We were telling everyone about what we were doing and the problems we were going through and how we were solving them. And we got a lot of messages from quite a few people, actually, where we were just sort of like giving them advice and answering their questions and giving them referrals for specialists and things like that. And then eventually we started asking people like Cynthia, when they would reach out, and literally the subject of the email would be, please help, because they didn't just know how to do it, how to even get started, how to find an architect, how to find a general contractor. It's in New York City, general contractors it's tough to find a really good one. There are a lot of bad ones. And so how to find the right team and how to put everything together. And so a lot of people reach out to us, and we started just sort of asking, like with Cynthia, would you like us to help you do this? And Cynthia she's our first client. So we're like, this is the first time we know we did our own project. Yours is the first one that we're gonna take on as well. So it's been a really fun process, and we've learned a ton through it. And she's a really unique client because she is an Instagram influencer. She designed the space, like the space is put together to take photos in. And so it was a fun project in that way because it's an opportunity to design a really cool space that she's going to take a lot of photos in.
For me, it was like everything that Barry said, no, you can't do in our own place. Like we had the power to do at Cynthia's because she loves color. And I was just like amazed. Everything she was telling me that she wanted to do, I was like, yes, I'm in love.
Yeah. A lot of color and a lot of pattern.
A lot of pattern. And it's just wrapping up so beautifully. I mean, I told Barry this earlier. I was saying that if we can get through this renovation, which we're so close to wrapping up, we're going to be good for life because not only do we have COVID to deal with, and literally renovation had to stop for 3 months, Cynthia and her husband also had twins in the middle of this renovation. So, there was different emotions all throughout this, this time of renovating her place.
You bring up a really good point. And I think, if you'll bear with me, just to step away from design for 1 second, because you bring up something really, really interesting. We learn, I coach youth soccer, and I always tell the girls, you don't learn anything from a win, but you will learn so much from a loss. And I kind of feel that that's where we are today, where you don't really learn much day to day. The days are long, the years are short, right? But then when something like this happens, where we've been for the last 7.5, 8 months, we learn a lot, right? We learn about who we are, who others really are. We learn about how we want to live. And I think that that's one of the really important things. And, what you're talking about now, it feels trivial at the time, but the conversations about color versus grayscale, they don't mean as much when life and death and culture are some of those things that we're talking about now. And I just think it's really interesting that you mentioned we'll be okay now because we've lived through this. I believe that wholeheartedly, and I think that's really cool. And with that, I was hoping, Erica, can you run through some of the images so that we can look at this project, and as we do, will you sort of guide us through what we're looking at here?
Yeah, we'd love to.
And I love that background. That's that tile that's on my background.
I was gonna say, I'm seeing it in 2 places right now. So.
Which one is that? The one that's in my background? What?
Duquesa.
Okay, that's the Duquesa. Okay.
Cement.
Yeah.
And they actually used it in 2 different colors, both the black colorway and then the blue colorway that we're showing. So I have this sort of starting at the beginning from where you started shopping with Walker and Zanger, but I can jump into more of the install images, or if you want to walk us through this part.
Yeah, so on the left-hand side here, or our left, we're actually looking at the home of Cynthia and Les. You're looking at a door right now that we're in the process of putting in the new door. So you might notice that the transom above there is cut in half. And the reason behind that is we actually open up the entire back wall at her place. And we put up a large glass sliding. So there's going to be tons of natural light coming into the space. But the only way we can get it into the building, as you know, the brownstones are connected, was to get it through the front door. So we actually had to cut the transoms to make access for the glass panel. But we put in brand new windows over here as well. And on the right-hand side is our shopping trip to the showroom here in New York City, Walker Zanger, which was so much fun. And this was the cement tile that we chose to go ahead with. We went with the blue and white star and cross. And Erica, I forget the name of the specific tile, but it was the terracotta outdoor tile. And it was just so beautiful. And we're so excited to install that on the new deck.
Yeah, that's going to be a really awesome feature of the house because, like Jordon said, when you walk in, we opened up the entire parlor level, which is the level that you walk into if you're not familiar with Brownstone, Brooklyn. You walk up the stoop and you're on the parlor level. And it's totally open. So their place, unfortunately, which is common with a lot of historic places in Brooklyn, a lot of the original stuff was stripped out. And so there wasn't a lot of detail inside to save. And so another thing that's interesting for us with her project versus ours, and probably almost all of our other projects, is that it was kind of a blank slate where we really were able to start from scratch with it. So it was a little bit different for us from that perspective too. But it's totally open, and right back to the kitchen, which has that really large, floor to ceiling, wall to wall window that we put in, and that leads onto a deck that's on the second level, and that's where that star and cross tile is going to be on the deck outside. It's going to have a nice sort of like outdoor living room feel, a really beautiful pop of color with that really rich blue and mixed in with the white tile. So it's going to be a really nice feature of not just the deck outside, but even looking at that beautiful view out the window onto it.
Yeah, that tile is ceramic Alhambra, and I think y'all created your own custom. We have the star and cross, but the colors are custom to you guys, so it's going to be a moment for her for sure.
Absolutely.
We can't
So
wait.
this is a little more of the shopping trip.
Yes, pre-COVID, which seems like
Oh, was it?
People together.
yeah, pre-COVID.
No
And we're with Dana and Drew over here on the left-hand side. Cynthia and Les, her husband, are in the middle. We just really just had such a great time shopping.
Yeah.
It's so helpful to go into the showroom where you see we have everything pulled out on the table. We were putting together, different colors and different options. And it was just really helpful because it can be there's so many decisions that have to be made, especially in a renovation as large as the ones that we work in. I mean, it's an overwhelming amount of decisions that have to be made. So being able to go into the showroom and get all those decisions made kind of all at once in a way that just you see everything sort of pulled together with all the samples there was really, really helpful.
Great.
As you were doing your showroom trip, did you know what you were looking for? Did you have an idea what you were looking for, or was this really part of discovery?
We did go in with an idea. Like there were some choices that were made. We definitely we always have our clients put together some inspiration photos for us and to pull together some looks that they like. We put together a Pinterest board or something just so we can understand what they're going for in each space. And we actually have them do that for every single space that we're designing. And it's just really helpful because I think it's a good way for them. Otherwise, if you ask them to tell you what they're looking for, it's tough for people to come up with what they're, just to verbally sort of explain. So being able to just come up with those visuals. And so we went in with their inspiration, their Pinterest boards. We always put together an inspiration or a design deck as well. So based on that inspiration that they send, we'll put together kind of like a lookbook for each space. And so we did go in with that sort of like those guideposts in mind. But there's also a lot of discovery that happens too. So there's things that we didn't even think of that, there's something on the wall that kind of catches your eye.
Yeah, that deck tile, we did a complete 180. Originally, we were just going to do almost like a terracotta outside, and we just scratched that immediately after we saw this. That tile that you mentioned, just that blue color was so stunning.
Mm-hmm. So this is probably, it's one of our favorite rooms in the house.
It's also the smallest room in the house.
Smallest room.
It's the powder room. And this lies right inside the middle of the kitchen area. And to the left-hand side, there's this very small space that we're utilizing as the powder room. And we found this gorgeous, gorgeous tile at Walker's Anger, the Ellington. And it is, what we decided to do is we're deciding to do the accent wall here at the black and the brass. And that's on that accent wall leading all the way down to the floor. And on the three contrasting walls from floor to ceiling, we're doing the white and brass. And the combination of the two together are just so stunning. And it actually makes the room brighter.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you go into that room, it's like you were transported into like a different place because you're just surrounded by, this pattern and color and the shininess of the brass. So it's really a special little place. And the fact that the way that the black and brass is on the floor and that one wall, it really kind of draws your eye up. And so it makes the space feel even larger than it is. And it was also, I think it was a interesting kind of bold choice to have the tile go all the way up to the ceiling on all of the walls too, in such a small space. But it's really, really cool. And we love the way it's come out. We can't wait to get everything else in there to see it.
Yeah, this isn't a finished photo. Within the next week, week and a half, we'll bring in all the light fixtures in, obviously the toilet and all the other finishes necessary for the room.
Well, let me ask you something, because I feel strongly that, you can tell a lot about a designer by what they do in small spaces. And I don't mean to diminish larger spaces, but when you have budget and space, it's a more simplified process as to what you can do with it. When you're limited by the space itself, and you talk about going floor to ceiling, with this, was there any trepidation? Was there any, when you were going into this, like, oh, do we want to do that? Will it close it off? Or was it just like, you know what, we're just going for it. This is just too amazing not to.
I think it's kind of the opposite. I think we knew we were going big in the powder room.
You did.
It's always fun in New York, the powder room, that there's usually in a brownstone, there's not any bedrooms on the living level, right? Because the footprint of the house is too small for that. So they're all upstairs or downstairs. And so the little bathroom that's on the parlor level is always tiny, but it is a really fun place to just go completely crazy.
Yeah.
And even if all the walls are white and everything is pretty plain in the rest of the house, like it is an area that we find our clients are always very comfortable with doing something a little bold.
Yeah.
And so we went in there knowing we were going to do that.
Yeah. We originally knew we were wanting a black and gold theme in that bathroom. However, I remember visiting the showroom and there was this tile and it was almost like a jungle mosaic. And what was it, Erica?
Botanicals.
Yes, the botanicals.
Love that.
And we both had this thought.
It was close.
Of being like, should we just scratch the black and gold all together and just do botanicals in the space? But I'm happy we went with the Ellington.
Can you tell us the square footage of that space, just so we all understand what that means?
It's 3 by 5, 3 feet by 5 feet.
Oh,
so it's very, I mean, it is you open the door and there's a toilet and a sink. So,
but for New York, it's large.
Yeah.
See, it's all in perspective, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, no, I love it. I'm just curious, a recall back to your place. Did you go bananas in your own parlor bath?
You know what's crazy is no, because we didn't put one in.
We didn't do a powder room.
We opted for no powder room because it is also, if you're keeping the original layout of like there's a traditional layout. Every brownstone is kind of laid out the same way. You walk in, you're in a vestibule, there's a stairwell that goes up with like the banister and it's in its own little room with a wall, and then you walk into the rest of it. If you keep that, it's tough to squeeze it in. And you have to take the space from somewhere else. And so for us, it wasn't important. We really wanted an amazing like showstopper kitchen. And we didn't. Yeah, I did. And we're like, I just don't want to take, I know it's 3 by 5, but that's 3 feet that we're taking out of the kitchen or out of something else. And so, we put in an additional bathroom upstairs. That was part of our project. And I sort of like, even, this is a little TMI, but even in the room is small, but it's kind of close to the kitchen. It's close to the dining room. And I'm just kind of like I go upstairs and go to the bathroom instead of like right next to the kitchen kind of a person. So we didn't do it, but yeah.
Okay.
Maybe the next one.
No, that's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, so back to Simply Sin. So we've heard about the kitchen. Erica, can we go look at the kitchen as we do this? And while we do, I just find it so interesting that botanicals and this are so vastly different.
Okay, yeah. So this is the one of the upstairs bathrooms, and that's the Fez Duquesa on the floor, which is really beautiful. So it's the same one that's behind Josh. When we did use that one as well in a different bathroom in the house. I think we have photos of that too. It is a beautiful tile. Like I would use this tile like in every single project that we do. It's great for the vestibule space. It's great for a bathroom. I love the kind of Moroccan inspired feel of it. It's very matte. It's cement tile. So it looks really beautiful. And this bathroom doesn't have a lot of color in it, but we did want to make sure that we highlighted pattern in this bathroom. So every single wall is completely covered in herringbone tile. And I think that's the milk crackle tile, if I'm not mistaken. It's a 3x12 tile. Has a really nice handmade look to it. It's got like the crackle in it that gives it a lot of interest. And so the combination of these two tiles we thought looked really nice, and the pattern sort of took the place of where we might have used color in another room. Well,
Barry, so there really is no color here. Are you in heaven? Do you absolutely love it?
It's great.
This is very twitchy.
It's my thing.
Throw in a little herringbone, a little charcoal gray, and yeah.
Well, along those lines, listen, I think what's really interesting is in the absence of color, you've made up for it with an abundance of texture. And I think that they kind of, in this case, I guess they can sort of serve interchangeably. Yes?
Absolutely.
Yep.
And the crackle, and it's hard to tell in this photo, but it has such a beautiful texture to it that you really are getting pattern upon pattern upon pattern. So no matter which angle you're looking at it, there's a better shot. No matter what angle you're looking at it, every angle of the room looks completely different.
Yeah, no,
and
that's
for the installer geeks out there, and Josh wouldn't ask this question, but I will. Do you know what grout you used on the...
I would not ask that question.
No.
Yeah.
It's a like a medium gray grout. So we wanted to use something that would highlight the pattern in it. So we didn't want to go charcoal and make it too dark. So it's a medium gray, so you can still see the pattern, doesn't blend in with the tile color. And also, we tried. I don't think we've done white grout anywhere yet. So that's all
great.
Yeah. So it's always a shade of gray.
It's okay.
No, I love that. You know what, though, Erica, I'm going to start asking about grout, because you bring up a very good point, and that is you have options with this. If you go too light, you disappear the herringbone. If you go too dark, it overpowers it. So I think you really do have to consider which shade you're going with.
Yeah, the grout is really important. And we found that after tile is grouted, it can look completely different. If it's a darker tile and you use a little bit of a lighter grout, it can lighten it up a little bit. We've seen tile go from, having like a greenish tone to a lot more gray tone, depending on what the grout color you choose. So it's really important. And I know that, it's another thing that's really helpful going to the showroom, because there are grout samples that you can compare next to the tile so that you can have an understanding of what it's going to look like. And of course, you can highlight a pattern. If it's this case, we used herringbone, or if you put tile in a brick pattern or you stack it, you can highlight that by using a contrasting grout, or you can kind of make it disappear with not doing that. So it's actually one of the things that I think people don't really spend a lot of time on, but it's important. We didn't have any problems with it. Everything went in really well, and there were no issues, especially with the cement tile. No.
And the reason why you say this is we wanted to make sure that, herringbone can be a difficult pattern, especially so we worked very closely with the contracting team on this just to make sure that the whole entire pattern was consistent throughout the space.
The one thing that I would say, and it obviously wasn't fault of the tile, but putting tile in a herringbone pattern requires extra tile. There's a lot more cuts that have to be made in the tiles. And so we ran out of tile. Of course, we were trying to be conservative and not, end up with boxes of tile left over. And so the team was really amazing, taking our frantic phone call one day about
Thank you, Dana. You're out there.
and getting us more tile really quickly. So that's the thing to keep in mind is when you put tile in certain patterns like this, it is going to require a little more overage than you think you need because of all the cuts that have to be made.
I'm curious along those lines, and we can file this away under lessons learned. Did you learn any specific metric that you would apply to that for purposes of overage? If you were to do this project again, how much more do you think you would order by percentage, do you think?
20%.
I would get, if we're a herringbone pattern, I would get 20% more.
That's our number.
20% overage. If it's not herringbone, if it's a tile that's custom and hard to get, I would still get 15, even if it wasn't herringbone. And if it's something that's easy and we can make a phone call and get more in 3 days, then maybe we can try to get by with 10% as long as we know we can get it quick.
Yeah, I think lesson learned on this is just know the inventory levels prior. If it is a custom tile, go up on your overage. But if it's well stocked, then I think you can go with the consistent 15%.
That makes sense. That's great. Hey, Erica, this might also be a good time. It looks like there's a couple of questions.
There are.
Do you want to sort of ask those?
Sure. So I just, there was just one posted about images, and I just want to let everyone know that the project isn't complete. So that's why you're seeing installation images. And they're working on getting that project finished up right now, so we can just kind of address that. And then, let me just stop sharing, get us out of there. Yeah. And then starting up at the top, is there a typical budget that you have when doing a renovation that you usually find electrical, plumbing problems that you're wanting to keep the original elements of the home? So a little bit around budget and the pre-planning process.
The budget can vary pretty dramatically, but if we're doing a renovation in New York and, a brownstone in all of our projects, usually the whole 3 or 4 story gut renovation of the entire building. A lot of times there's 3 or 4 bathrooms. Most of these places have more than one unit in it as well. So a lot of times there's like a owner's duplex or triplex above a rental on the ground floor. So there's even multiple kitchens, all the electrical and plumbing. So I would say the budgets range for our projects from $250,000 to up to $600,000 or $700,000, usually where they're falling. Most of the people in fact, all of our clients are very kind of normal people, average families that are renovating their homes.
Home buyers.
Yeah, almost all of them are first-time home buyers.
Yeah.
Pretty much, I would say 90% of our clients are first-time home buyers. Lots of babies. Everyone's having babies and growing families. So they're very average type of families that are building their home and have, budget is limited. And so we have to kind of figure out how to work with a limited budget and, upgrade specific things, kind of elevate the entire design, but keep everything within range.
One follow-up to that, and I was going to ask, you had mentioned that the floor plans within the brownstone is relatively consistent, and I'm curious if that helps you in the budgeting process, because with that consistency, it might help you to plan a little bit more.
Yeah, I would say it can. It is easy. We sort of know what to expect. We know what the square footage is going to be. We know kind of the proportions of the space and the rooms. We kind of know where to expect the issues and the problems before we even find them. And so it does make it more consistent for us. And, I guess that can translate into budget in some ways. At least it gives us, it creates a situation where there are less surprises because we know what to expect for sure. Yeah, so it is helpful in that way.
There's a question here that's kind of related, but it's are you licensed to take responsibility to participate in this work? Do you have liability insurance if something goes wrong? So it's not related to budget, but it's probably part of the plan.
That's a great question. We do. Yeah, we are an LLC. We have our insurance.
We have general liability and professional liability. So a contractor has to have general liability insurance, but not professional. And an architect has to have professional liability, but not general. And we actually have both. But we are not licensed, and we don't actually do anything that requires a license. And we, even in our agreement that we have with our clients, it says that we are not a general contractor. We are not an architect or an engineer. We bring all those folks in, and our clients have separate contracts with them. But we don't take any part of that pie.
Another follow-up to that issue, because that's really interesting. That's a really interesting model. I'm curious, because your clients will have agreements with each of the trades independently. Do you handle cost pricing and the financial side under your agreement, so then they're really just doing the execution under the trades agreement? Or is it different?
It actually varies with different clients. Most of them, we are actively involved because we would have probably brought that professional in. So it's architects that we have brought in. It's a contractor that we have brought in, and we interact with them for the most part. But they pay them directly. They have their own contract. We're not party to the contract with the general contractor. We have a separate agreement with the client. They have their own agreement with their contractor, and they pay the contractor directly.
Okay, so it's a separate relationship that they have with you, and then a separate relationship that they have with the trade, but under your business model. And it's the business model side of it that I think is so fascinating. So there's a lot of trust that also goes in. So the people that you're working with, there has to be a lot of trust on your end with them. Is there a vetting process that you go through, or is this sort of you just consistently work with the same people while you can?
Oh yeah, there's for the professionals to work with. Yeah, there's definitely a vetting process, and we do work with. And I think that's one of the things that our clients feel comfortable with, is because the professionals that we bring in are people that we have worked with, on other projects.
Yeah. And we also, we put together a full scope of work, and then we make sure that the client also approves of the specialist's duty of work. So if that entails us bringing them over to other jobs that they've completed to make sure that and get referrals, we want to make sure it's a true partnership.
Yeah. And we'll help them get the contract together with the general contractor. So, an average person that's never done a renovation before, and it might even be their first home that they're ever buying, has no idea what to look for in a contract with a contractor. Yeah. And so we're not party to the contract, and we're sort of like a third party being able to help consult with them and make them understand what should be in the contract, what's standard, what isn't, how to structure the payment schedule with the contractor. And so we're able to help them out with all that stuff, but then they have that separate contract with the contractor.
Got it. So that advisory role is a big part of what you got, is what you do.
Absolutely.
With that, I just want to circle back and remind everyone a couple of things. First of all, Barry and Jordan, thank you so much for making the time today. This was amazing. It really was.
That's great. Thank you.
I would encourage everyone to go to thebrownstoneBoys.com and check out the website, check out the images. And I'm going to assume that between that and the Instagram, when this project is completed, we're going to see all the finals.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Now, you're going to shoot it. Are you also going to do it in video?
We are. Yeah, we're hopeful to do some video updates of the finished space. Also, Cynthia, follow her as well, Simply Sin. I know as soon as they move in, she's going to be taking the most beautiful photographs in one of the most beautiful homes. So make sure to follow her too.
Simply Sin, S-I-N. SYN?
YN.
YN. Perfect. That's great. And if you want to hear this again, if you want to listen again, which why wouldn't you? Convo by Design, you can subscribe to the podcast everywhere you find your favorite podcasts. And with that, Walker Zanger, thank you so much for presenting the showroom so that we can hear from remarkable talent like the Brownstone Boys. Guys, thank you so much.
Thanks, Erica.
Thanks for
Thank you,
having us.
everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, Jordon, for appearing on the show, creating such a beautiful, reimagined series of spaces and respecting the original work as you do. Thank you to my wonderful partner sponsors, Thermosol, Pacific Sales, Design Hardware, Timber Tech, and Monogram for your continued support. And thank you for taking the time to listen to the show and sharing it with your family and friends and colleagues who might be interested. Until next time, be well and take today first.